Hello, sorry for the late recording. We are up to Chaf Aleph on the days all the way on the bottom. Our learning is Ilu Nishmat Minzol Mariam Bas Kamen Ruvain for Shabbos and Aliyah. And we, as we discussed the other day, are starting the halachos of Hanukkah. We're going to spend a few more days discussing the laws of Hanukkah and discussing different related pieces to Hanukkah. Today we're going to go on a couple of tangents. Here we go. Rav Kahana. Says Rav Kahana, Darash of Nachman Bar Yomi Mishmei Rav Tanchum. So we're told that a Hanukkah light which is placed above 20 amos is going to be puzzle. The same halacha applies to a sukkah. When a sukkah is 20 amos high, the schach is more than 20 amos high, and then you're not able to see it, and therefore it's puzzle. A mavoi, which is when you have a area which is a rishus harabim, only midrabanan, and you're able to make it into a private domain, you need a certain reminder, a certain stick, which is going to remind people that it is a private domain, and therefore that stick has to be under 20 amos. If it's above 20 amos, it's invalid. Sorry, I'm on a train. You might hear some background noise. Okay, and Ner Chanukah, the same idea. If it's too high, then you're not able to actually see the Chanukah candles, and therefore it's going to be puzzle. Now, it's worth mentioning that a person who lives in an apartment building, what do you do? So the post can point out. Sorry. Okay, so the post can point out that as long as there are other buildings which are similar height in the vicinity, then it's true. From the ground, you will not see that high, but if there's another building somewhere in the area, they'll also be able to see across from their building, and therefore it is not a problem. It's only when it's one building, it's one place that's above 20 amos high, that's when you have a real shiloh, that's when you have a real problem. Okay, let's go further. A completely unrelated point, but it's just listed from the same lineage of people. In other words, as you've noticed many times, you'll have a certain Amora say something, he'll say something in the name of his teacher and his teacher. So here too we have a teaching which is from the same line of people, even though it doesn't, at least simply put, doesn't seem to have any connection to the laws of Hanukkah. So Amar of Kahana, Darsh Nasan, Brahman Yume, Mishmei Rav Tanchum, Maidich Siv. What is the meaning of the pasuk? Vabor Reik Ein Bo Mayim. That the pit was empty, there's no water in it. What's this a reference to? There's a reference to Yosef. When Yosef is thrown into the pit, the Torah tells us the pit was empty and there's no water in it. Once the Torah says it's empty, why does it have to say it's empty? There's no water. Once you say it's empty, then you know that there's no water there. What's the point? Ella, why does it say? But why does it say that there is no water? My main boat to say that there's no water, but there were snakes and scorpions. So this is like a hidden miracle that when Yosef was thrown into a pit, it wasn't just a pit that he was thrown into, it was a pit that was filled with poisonous animals, and nonetheless nothing happened to him. Okay, again, not related, but it was just said from the same people, and therefore we quoted that in this context. Okay, back to the laws of Hanukkah. The Hanukkah lights have to be placed within the tefach of the doorway. Okay, and which side do you place it? Why is it a tefach is a small amount, basically like this much, and the reason it has to be placed there has to be placed by the door. The question is which side of the door. Okay, he says it's from the right. Rav Shmuel Midifti from the left side. So normally we do things on the right, so it would make a lot of sense the right. But interestingly, the halacha is you're actually supposed to put it on the left side. So again, here in North America, outside of Israel, most people do not light by the door, but certainly in Israel the custom is to light by the door. They light on the left side. Why would that be? Says the Gemara, Ner Chanukah mismol, umezuzah miyamin. So that the Ner Chanukah is on the left side, and the mezuzah is on the right side. You're going to walk into your house on Chanukah, you're surrounded by mitzvos. You have the mezuzah on the right side, which already it's there, and then you add the Chanukah candle to the left side, and therefore you are surrounded by mitzvos. Beautiful. Amar Rav Yehuda Marvasi. Us the hearts was most connected Ner Chanukah. Okay, some background noise. Hold on. Okay. Almost done. Okay, here we go. So we saw earlier that according to at least the way we paskin, you are not allowed to have hana from the lights of the menorah. You're not allowed to benefit. Now the poskim, the Rush in particular, says that when the halacha is you can't have hana, it means you can't sit down and read a book, but a small, quick usage, that's not going to be a problem. And nonetheless, meaning based on the idea that you can have benefit from it, it would be a small and short usage, that would not be a problem. But nonetheless, Rav Yehuda Marvasi comes along and says, even though you're allowed to do quick things, to count money, that's like a disrespectful thing to do, to count that by the Chanukah candles, that cannot be done. When it was said before, Shmuel, he said to me, he says is there sanctity that it can't be done? In other words, where does this come from? That you can't even count money from it? Like, why can't you do that? So Maskal Rav Yosef, does blood have holiness in it? Okay, the Tanya, nonetheless, we learn that's when you slaughter an animal, actually relevant to this week's parsha, where it talks about the prohibition of eating blood. There's also a mitzvah to cover the blood, kisoi hadam, and we're taught that the person slaughters the animal with his hands, and then they cover the blood with earth. And the Gemara learns that the same hand that you use to slaughter the animal, you have to use a hand to cover the blood, okay? As opposed to, you can't use your foot, you can't just kick dirt on it. Why? So that mitzvahs are not disgraceful. In other words, do a mitzvah by kicking, disrespectful. So Hachinami, so the Gemara says, Rav Yosef says, same thing over here. The reason that you can't count money by, it's not because that's kedusha, it's not because that's sanctity, but just like this idea of the mitzvah of kisui hadam, of covering the blood, theoretically there'd be no issue kicking earth over the blood, but unless it should not be done with one's foot because it's disrespectful. Similarly, over here with Ner Chanukah, you can't count money, even though technically it'd be allowed, but because it'd be a bizarre, it'd be of a disgrace, therefore you can't do it. Okay, the Gemara continues. Bamine Rameir of Yeshua ben Levi, Mali Stapik Minoye Sukkah Kol Shiva. Are you allowed to use the decorations of the sukkah during Yom Tov? He said, no, you cannot do so, because we already learned that just like you can't count money opposite the Chanukah candle, meaning it's a disrespectful use, so too you can't go ahead and take items that were hung or hanged on your sukkah and enjoy them. Now, back in the day, the decorations they would use were not the fancy decorations we had. Rather, what they had were fruits. They typically would hang fruit. Some people still do that. So the question was, could you go and eat those fruit? The answer is, it's disrespectful. Just like you count money by a Chanukah candle, so too you can't use you eat the decorations over sukkahs. Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef takes issue with the whole dialogue over here. He says, Mari de Avram, by the master of Avram. It's like an expression like, what in the world? Okay? Talei Tanya, but the Tanya, Rav Yeshua was asked the question. He was asked the question, what about the sukkah? And he answered from Chanukah. The thing is like this: the laws of Chanukah were not listed in any early sources. We spoke about that earlier. It wasn't found in any Mishnayos, any Brisas. It's found in the Gemara. And he's going ahead and teaching us a halacha that is about sukkah, which is found explicitly in the Mishnayos, and he's connecting it, he's learning it from something which is not taught in the Mishnayos. Again, Mishnayos, Brisas, those are authoritative. So it's bizarre when I say, yeah, I'm going to prove it to you. Yes, I have an answer for you from a Gemara. And really the discussion of sukkah, the answer to this question of sukkah is already found in the Brisas, in the Mishnayos. So meaning, he unpacks it. Let's see what he means. Sukkah Tanya. Sukkah, it says explicitly, Chanukah Latanya, whereas Chanukah, it doesn't say it explicitly. We learned in the Gemara. It's not in a Brisa. The Tanya. Here's the Brisa. Sicha kilchasa. A person covered his sukkah in properly. And the person covers it with curtains and linens. And they hang nuts, peaches, almonds, pomegranates, and clusters of grape, and wreaths of grain, and containers with wine, oil, and fine flour. These were pretty elaborate decorations, all food based. Okay. Also, you can't have any benefit from it on Sukkot until the night after Sukkot, until Sukkot is over. If you made a Tanai, if you said before Sukkot began, I do not plan on having it up on the Sukkah the entire time, but rather I'm having in mind that I could go ahead and eat this food over Yom Tov, that would allow you to do so. Hakol Lefi Tanai, everything works according to the stipulation. So the bottom line is, his point was that we asked the question about Sukkot, and then we answered from Hanukkah. That's a weird thing to do. Elam Rav Yosef says no. The idea is avuham dekulu dam, the father, so to speak, the source of all these halachos is the mitzvah of covering the blood. That we learn from kisui hadam, that just like there it says explicitly in the Torah that you cannot go ahead and kick dirt over it, even though you fulfill the mitzvah because it's disrespectful. So too we learn to all mitzvahs have to be done in a respectful fashion. We can't do it in a disrespectful fashion, and therefore for Hanukkah you can't count money on it. And when it comes to the decorations of the sukkah, you cannot benefit from those decorations on sukkahs because it's disrespectful to do so. Okay, now we're going to have a couple of machloksim regarding the respect to mitzvos. Okay, general principles about respect to mitzvos. Itzmar, we learned. Rav Amar Malikin, Malikin, Miner Laner. You can't light Hanukkah candles from one light to another. In other words, you have, it's day 3 or day 2, let's just say, and you lit one. You can't light from one candle to the other. In other words, normally you have to take a shamash. You have the lighter candle. You have the candle that's using to light. You light one and then you light the other. But as opposed to, you lit one and then you put the candle to the next one or something along those lines. Okay. Shmuel Amar Malikin. Shmuel says it's not a problem to do so. He's not concerned about the disgrace. Okay. Rav Amar Ematir tzitzis mi begel leveged. Rav says you can't take tzitzis from one piece of clothing and tie those strings to another piece of clothing. Again, it's a disrespect to Shmuel Amar. Matir mi begel leveged. You are allowed to do so. Rav Amar Ein Alach Rav Shimon Begerera. Rav says the law does not go like Rav Shimon in regards to dragging. What's that all about? So there's a halacha that you can't make a furrow, you can't plow on Shabbos, and so digging something is a problem. Now, what about dragging a heavy item on the ground? tent. So it's not necessarily going to start digging down. It could. So it's machlokas. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, it might happen. You can't do it. Rabbi Shimon says it's not your intent. You plan on just dragging the bench, and therefore, even if it does happen, that's not an issue. Okay, so Rav says the halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon. He says, in other words, he says you cannot drag. Shmuel Amar halacha Rabbi Shimon Megreira. Shmuel says you are allowed to drag. Amar Abaye. Okay, those are three machlokim. Okay, two of them are about respect for mitzvahs. One of them has nothing to do with it, but it's just three machlokim between Rav and Shmuel. Amar Abaye. Abaye says, "Kol mili demar avi Rav." All of my teachers, my teacher in every halacha, he ruled like Rav. Levar mihani tlas avi Shmuel. Exception of these three halachos where he ruled like Shmuel. Okay, meaning malikim ner lener, that he held you are allowed to light from one candle to another. Umatir beged leveged, you are allowed to unfasten tzitzis from one piece of clothing and then attach those tzitzis onto another one. And the law is like Rav Shimon when it comes to dragging. The Tanya was learned. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon said, "Go rare adam mita kisa v'safsal." A person's allowed to drag a bed, a chair, or a bench across the ground on Shabbos. As long as you don't intend to make a furrow. Okay, and so we rule like Rav Shimon. Okay, Yasvahu. Okay, Yasvahu, let's go a little bit further. Yasvahu merabanan kamein to Rav Adavar Hava. There was a rabbi sitting in front of Rav Adavar Hava, Yasav Kamar, and the rabbi sitting in front of Rav Adavar Hava said, Rav Adavar Hava said, "Time of Rav Mishum Bizui Mitzvah." Okay, the Rabbanim said in front of Rav Adavar Hava that the reason that Rav does not allow you to light from one candle to another is because it's a disgrace to the mitzvah. Amrlahu, the Rav Adavar Hava responded, said, "Lo sitzaitzu, don't listen to him. The issue isn't that it's disgrace to mitzvah number one, that you're taking from the first candle and using it for something else, but rather it's that it looks like you're weakening the mitzvah. In other words, when I'm lighting from candle 1 to candle 2, at that moment the first candle flickers a little bit, makes it a little bit smaller, so it's like I'm negating the first mitzvah. Ask the Gemara, my benai, what's the difference? Whether it's that I'm disgracing the mitzvah or I'm weakening the mitzvah. The difference is in a scenario where I light directly from one candle to another. Meaning, if it's because it's a disgrace to the mitzvah, if I'm lighting directly from one candle to another, it's not a disgrace to the mitzvah because both are the same mitzvah, so it's not disgraceful. But if the idea is that I'm weakening the mitzvah, then it'll be forbidden even to go from one candle to another because it's going to weaken it as I do so. So again, within Rav, there's two understandings of what he meant. So he said you can't light from one to another. Is it that one way of looking at that is I light candle number 1, and then my shamash goes out. Let's say. So how do I get light from my shamash? I take it from candle number 1, and then I light it to candle number 2. That would be an issue. That would certainly be an issue according to Rav. The question is, if I light directly from one to another, there we'd say depends on which opinion. If the issue is that bizui mitzvah is no disgrace to the mitzvah because I'm just using that light to light another mitzvah, so that's not a disgrace to the mitzvah. But if it's weakening the mitzvah, at the moment that I'm lighting candle number 2, it weakens candle number 1, and therefore it is going to be forbidden according to the second opinion, the opinion of Adavar Hava. We are going to pick up tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Have a good Shabbos.